Black Talk Radio.
Is Scotty Reed. I'm the founder of the Black Talk Radio Network, a podcasting and digital radio streaming platform that was actually established in 2008. And I believe it'll be our 18th year anniversary coming up this November. So we are pioneers when it comes to producing digital media that is particularly aimed at reaching a black audience. Now, we are, most of us who've come through the network are Pan-Africanists. That means that we recognize that the system we're dealing with is one of white supremacy. White supremacy is a global force, and it behooves us all who are against such things to band together. Okay, that doesn't mean that we have to let go of who we are, our cultural differences, our religious differences. No, we're uniting against a common evil. We recognize the problem and who's causing most of the problems. Now, back in the day, it used to be that we could easily identify a white supremacist because you had to be white to be one. I'm going to just quote Neely Fuller Jr. for those who've never heard of him. Check out the podcast, The Cows. That's the context of white supremacy on Black Talk Radio Network. You can also find them on other podcasting networks. Again, that's The Cows, the context of white supremacy. They are the ones that introduced me to Mr. Neely Fuller. I think Mr. Fuller's about 80-something years old now. But his quote is that there are three types of people in the known universe. There are white supremacists, there are white people, and there are non-white people. So although on this network you will hear me using terms like cultural terms like black, I mean that like black American, African American, because we do have a distinct culture that we built here in the past 400 years. We actually are the fabric, you would say, in especially certain areas of the United States. What we know now of as we built it in more ways than one. So when I distinguish myself as a black person, then that's not separating myself from other melanated people of any ethnicity, and it's also not separating myself from any person, regardless of these labels and categories these governments and academics have these boxes they have created for us. As long as you believe in practicing justice, as long as you believe in justice, I wouldn't even add equality because that would be assumed. You can't have justice without everybody being treated equal in the first place. So we just want, if you want to see justice, then I'm not separating myself from you in that regard. So I'm pretty much a working class person, been one all my life, and I identify with working class people. I grew up in the South, still in the South. Really got exposed to white people and their cultures in 1979 when we moved back home, meaning my mom moved from Detroit back home, which is North Carolina, and we've been here ever since, except for my stint in the military. So Mr. Fuller says you have to be white to be a white supremacist. I want to challenge that theory because that's what it is. I want to challenge his theory. I believe a black person, and I've seen this on different lives on TikTok as a topic. Can black people practice racism? Can black people be racist? And I would go on to say, yes, they can. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of melanated people out there that look like me. And let me go ahead and refresh my camera right now. We're coming right up on 9 o'clock. So I actually got started kind of early. Let me unfreeze my camera so people can see me. All right, there you go. And again, our podcast home is blacktalkradionetwork.com. Hope you'll check us out. It's managed by the nonprofit. I also founded and president of, also in 2008, which preceded the Black Talk Radio Network, is the Black Talk Media Project. And that is to just empower black working class people and black conscious thought. And that's why that network was established. And the only way that we've been able to keep it going and sustain is through donations to that nonprofit Black Talk Media Project. And you can find a way to do that at blacktalkradionetwork.com or any other platforms where we are distributing media or broadcasting live to you. All right, so let me go ahead and stop this right now. So I came across this meme. Let me see if I can read it. I definitely need to get some glasses or get some replacement glasses. But I guess what? As a veteran, and I don't say that claiming any kind of privilege or with any kind of pride. It is what it is. I did 6 years in the Colonizers army, and I got to wait till March. Now, granted, I'm supposed to get 2 pair a year, right? And I'm over a year due for two pair, and I still can't get any until next March. That's just terrible. That's terrible. And we got a major VA hospital right over there in Charlotte, North Carolina. But that's just, man. So I came across this meme. Let me see if I can scoot up here and read it. The colonial system nurtures the colonized people in such a way as to make them believe that salvation lies in their identification with the colonizers' values. And that's a quote coming from Franz. Fanon is his last name. He wrote the book, The Wretched of the Earth. I believe he's also was a socialist. I got to read more up on him. A friend of mine actually said that they read this book and said it was the best book they ever read. And I think that what he's talking about has produced black people who are colonizers. And I used to be a colonizer. I'm a reformed colonizer. I admit it. But usually when we talk about colonizers, we in the United States, in the Western world, we want to assign a skin color to it, right? And I think it's incorrect to do that. I do think white supremacists are the most responsible for white supremacy, number one, of course. But they have no shortage of volunteers from non-white people, including black people, to help them carry out their plans of world global domination. Yeah. And I actually invented a term called Mr. Neely Fuller. One of the things he talked about is white supremacists is not going to teach you how white supremacy works. So to describe these things in these mechanisms, you have to come up with your own words and phrases and terms. And so a few years back, I came up with the term proxy racism. So to answer the question, can black people be racist? Yes. By being the tools of a racist system, by being the tools of white supremacy. That's what I used to be as a member of the military. And I just thank the creator and Malcolm X's biography for waking me up in the midst of the Gulf War, which I was deployed to. Again, I don't mention these things for any kind of cred or privilege or any pride whatsoever. But I had that colonizer's mindset, but I was awakened during that time period. All right, so I believe, and let me just pull up some of the things I brought up, get through this, and we will do the multi-guest and let some people come up here and speak their piece, earn some coins, as they say on TikTok. I guess that's how you do things on TikTok is when somebody makes a great point or something you agree with, you give them coins. I'm still trying to learn the platform. Y'all bear with me. I'm an old radio head. Let me, yeah, here we go. But so that's what I'm asking. When did we become colonizers? Was there a point in time? And those who've been following my podcast, I guess, for the past 17 years, you know I'm a historian. You know I read a lot, I share a lot over the airways through podcasts, New Abolitionist Radio. Y'all know we are researchers. We researched all 50 states to find out which of these states' constitution is still allowing for slavery, just like the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So I tend to look at things from a historical lens, and so that's how I approach this question: when did we become colonizers? And I think there is no doubt that we've come to the point to where we are colonizers. Does that mean each and every last one of us are colonizers? No. No. Does that mean that each and every one of us who are colonizers, even though we're colonizers, maybe you never looked at it that way? I certainly did not look at it that way until my first duty station in the U.S. Army. I got sent to Schofield Barracks out there. And actually, Schofield will come up in my research on whether or not or trying to point to a point in time when black people became colonizers, equal partners in this white crime against humanity, is a way to put it. Y'all give me just a second. I post so much. I'm trying to find my citations. Okay, I do got a question though. This person had wrote to me in some of the same stuff I put out on this question. This person, she's melanated. She's not African American. She's not black. She lives in Pennsylvania, though. She said that she feels at this moment in answering that meme about the colonial system turning colonized people into colonizers by adopting the values of the colonizers. And so she said, but I feel she agrees with the statement, but she feels that in this moment that in Pennsylvania, she must defeat Donald Trump first. And certainly a lot of people had that fear of Donald Trump. I have no fear of anyone or any situation that I may face. That's because I know I have a creator. I also have a network of people that we gonna work it out and we gonna get through whatever. I mean, African Americans, look at how much we survived in this country. So you don't think we could survive another 4 years of Donald Trump? It's just a shame how fear mongering really drives a lot of people. They're afraid of what may happen while ignoring what is happening. You know, on that Trump thing, they talk about how Trump, and he does, encourage police in some of his statements to use police violence and brutality against people. He's known to be very, very pro-police and to support things like immunity for police. They call it qualified immunity. But here's the thing, that qualified immunity is pushed through on a state level. And this is where we have to understand how politics work. This is why it's important for people who participate in voting to vote every election and to inform themselves of all the candidates up and down the ballot. All right, you got to know who's running for governor on down to state auditor or down to district court judge or down to definitely the prosecutor. We got a MAGA prosecutor here in Gaston County who tried to prosecute me in violation of my freedom of speech for standing on the sidewalk holding a sign saying release the footage. And I was talking about the body cam footage of this young 22-year-old black man who had been shot at, I don't know how many times he's been hit, and this was like 2 years ago, by police 30-something times in a residential black neighborhood. It was a mixed neighborhood. It was some Latino or Hispanic people, migrants that live there too, and they unleashed that many rounds, and I got arrested for that because I refused to get off a public sidewalk. All right, I got arrested for that, and the guy was gonna prosecute me, but the sheriff, the so-called deputy, she wasn't even out there. My arresting officer on paper, she wasn't out there. I had the whole thing on video. That's why I was out there in the first place, and so she didn't show up to court. I guess because I said in the podcast, what she gonna do? Go up there and lie on the stand? She ain't nowhere in this video. She wasn't even out there. Somebody gave her some hearsay information and she signed off on it. So she ain't show up, and that's why the charges got dropped, and he even tried to talk some smack about it in the paper. So that's why it's important that we pay attention, because these people like Travis Page in Gaston County, North Carolina, has the power to put people into modern day slavery. And that is what the prison system is. It's modern day slavery. The 13th Amendment did not abolish it. But many of us work on these plantations, helping to enslave people. We caught up in the system, but because of our indoctrination and lack of exposure to alternative thinking, we never even realized our participation and I would say also our responsibility for what's happening. So when did we become the colonizers? And that again, I especially want to hear from Trump supporters. I want to hear from Harris supporters, because Trump and Harris are colonizers. And they're colonizers of the worst kind in modern history. Okay, really. And I can back that up with facts. All right. And this live I do believe I said it for adults only. But we're watching the genocide unfold in front of our eyes, and the two leading candidates are all for it. Trump said that Biden is actually holding Netanyahu back, holding the IDF back, and that's not the truth. And he would just let him just finish the job. So Trump is all on board for committing the G side, but the Democrats can't really hit him on that, because they always trying to compare him to, Mr. over there in Germany back in World War II. They try to compare him to that man and his party. But you would think, though, that they would see that as a point of attack. Hey, look, this dude is even calling for an all-out G-side on the Palestinians. But you can't do that. Harris can't do that because she's giving her full-throated support for a G-side. And based off of recent reporting from different outlets, I believe, I'm not going to name any sources, but anyone can Google it, right? But 90%, I'll bump it down. Let's just say 65%. 65% of the intelligence gathered to pick targets in Gaza and now Lebanon have been done by the United States. That means either the CIA, the Pentagon, or all of above are picking the targets. Before I came on air tonight, I just read about a strike that the Associated Press called it, Israeli strike kills 88 people. Got a little bit into the details of the article. It was saying that the majority of them are women and children, which we already know that. That's been the statistics for going on the entire year. The biggest victims are women and children. All right. So you got that going on. So what can Harris say? What can any Democratic strategist say? So guess what? That's on the table. That's on the table. And either way, no matter who you're voting for, you're voting your vote. In addition to whatever else you say your issue is, whether you're a Republican and you're saying you want to restrict abortions, even though historically abortions have been lowered to historic levels. I mean, low levels. Historic levels. That is what giving people access to health care. Barack Obama didn't go all the way with healthcare, what they call it, Medicare for all. He didn't go all the way. He had to blend or give the corporations, they're capitalistic, ain't go to make huge profits and what have you. So he didn't go for Medicare for all, but still what he did give a lot of women and girls access to products to help them plan their families. Okay? And that reduced abortions to historic lows. So who knew? If you wanted to get rid of abortions, then give women and girls health care. What is it that the people on the right, the Republicans, these Christian evangelicals talking about saving children, it's about saving these souls and what have you. What is it that you can't understand about that? And I don't understand why Democrats or Obama don't even make that point. Because they need to keep abortion on the table as a hot button issue. You wouldn't have to be talking about women's reproductive health care if you was talking about Medicare for all. That's everybody's health care. I can sit up here and talk about, even though I'm healthy, just saw my doctor for my yearly checkup, they do the blood works, everything. I'm in perfect health, he said, right? Other than, my injury, physical injury, but I'm managing the pain and what have you. But I'm in perfect health, living good, all of that. But a lot of black men suffer from hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, colon cancer, prostate cancer, just a whole wealth, and a lot of it has to do with diet, environment, and I would say stress on the job and working in the world of white supremacy and race. That is very stressful. I haven't worked in that environment in over 17 years, man. And it was very stressful. Tried to go back out there earlier this year, and I could not cut it. I could not tolerate with the hostile work environment. And I didn't have to. I was just doing it for some extra money, so I dropped. So, but we don't have to talk about these differences in health outcomes versus, let's say, black women's infant mortality rate versus white women. Let's just do Medicare for all. Let's just do Medicare for all. What's the problem with that? But let me get back on topic. When did we become colonizers? So I asked a research tool about segregation in the United States military. Make no mistake, you had victims of slavery who fought in the American Revolutionary War. That's how a slaver, a white slaver and a coward could get out of serving, because they had compensatory or compulsory service, meaning they drafted people, but a slaver could send one of his victims in his place. And to the point that black men made up 1/3 of the American Revolutionary Army. But I excluded that as a colonizer. When did we become colonizers? Because that war is more about fighting for one group of wealthy white supremacists trying to break away from a king that they didn't want to pay taxes to, in that whole nine yards. So it wasn't really, I guess it was a fight between white supremacist powers to who's going to get to colonize the United States. What would later become the United States of America, or North America, the whole hemisphere, actually, north, south. They didn't stop. They didn't stop. So I excluded the American Revolutionary War. Then, might as well skip over the war, 1812. Actually, some black people were part of the British force that burnt the White House after the U.S. started some mess up in Canada with one of the British settlements up there. And so black people were fighting for the British as well. So I excluded the war of 1812. No really major skirmishes. Black people are not in the United States military or militias. They're mainly victims of slavery, were primarily victims of slavery. They weren't on the slave patrols or what would later become the police forces. No, they were victims. And so we can't say that they became colonizers at any point during that time. So let's look at the Civil War. Well, we know that black Americans, victims of slavery, joined the war to free themselves from slavery, to free themselves and their communities on these plantations too. That's why they joined. All right, that's why the reason they were allowed to join is because the North was losing against the South. Lincoln knew it, so he had to issue the Emancipation Proclamation in order to get that labor and later manpower on the battlefield to defeat the Confederacy, because Lee was kicking their butt, almost, captured Washington, D.C. So that really wasn't a war, again, concerning black people about colonizing North America. No, we were fighting for our freedom. So we have to go up into the late 1800s, let's say the war against the indigenous nations. That's when the United States, and it kind of started under Lincoln. But the African American Union soldiers, black soldiers, weren't used to fight and conquer the indigenous nations going west to the Pacific at that point. No, but Lincoln was using the United States Army, particularly the cavalry, to commit atrocities against the indigenous people at that time. So, but we can't say black people, again, major victims of slavery, fighting for their own freedom in the Civil War. We can't really say they are colonizers. And then immediately following the Civil War, they were deployed throughout the South during Reconstruction to protect the civil rights, the federal civil rights. Remember, the first Civil Rights Bill was passed, I believe, in the 1870s, might have been 1877, if my memory serves me correct. And so the African-American Union troops and the victorious, U.S. Army were enforcing black people's rights and protecting them from these terrorists. During Ulysses S. Grant's presidency, we know that he deployed, he used the United States Department of Justice to really prosecute these terrorists domestically. I think that's when the Klan Act, I think it was 2 different Klan acts that was passed, but he really used General Ulysses, being the former Union general, became president. This is after Lincoln's assassination. So they were using, deploying these African-American troops to protect black people. All right. And then it was after Reconstruction, and that's when we enter the Jim Crow period and the black troops are withdrawn. And I think it was around that point that those black troops were sent out west to oppress indigenous people. Right. I think that's when it started. But then being a colonizer also has to do with a mindset, right? And so these are still former victims of slavery who are veterans of the U.S. Army, didn't get out the Army. Remember, this is a time of great instability, people trying to find their families, trying to find something to eat, trying to find shelter, being exploited, robbed, terrorized by these terrorist groups like the KKK and others. And so these men stayed in the military because it was a paycheck, and it was 3 hots in a cot. And I'm sure they were faced with, I'm not so sure. I had to go read if there's any accounts of these soldiers, writing letters, and if that's been recorded. I hope there is, but I haven't read any to see what their mindset was. Because on the one hand, I could see a Buffalo Soldier, as they was known, seeing indigenous nations all as one people and not knowing the difference between the nations. And just particularly just using the white man's term, the military term, as Indians. The political label that was given them as Indians, and then the white supremacist terms like savages and what have you. And so, but their first contact, how do I know their first contact didn't come through on the East Coast during the Civil War? Maybe they might have been fighting the Cherokee who sided with the Confederacy. Maybe they fought against them. Maybe they knew about these people. Remember, the 5 civilized tribes on the East Coast practiced slavery against Africans too, as well. And we're part of the slave patrols, slave catchers, whatever we want to call them. So those African Americans might have had that knowledge, but not the wherewithal and the other knowledge to know that this tribe over here in Arizona, Texas, wherever, that's not the same people that was harming your people and harming you. That's not the same people. So I don't know. Again, we're talking about people who are illiterate, basically, maybe learning to read at that point since they're in the military, maybe learning to read, do arithmetic, whatever, getting somewhat educated. But then I would have to ask the question, and let me go ahead and ask this question of this research tool. Let me see. Were the Buffalo Soldiers or any other African-American soldiers who participated in the westward expansion of the United States in the so-called Indian Wars participate in any mass killings or ethnic cleansing of indigenous villages? So let's see what the answer comes back as, because I've never come across any of those accounts. But let's see what ChatGPT, a quick research tool, and again, you do have to check ChatGPT. I do believe in using AI tools, but because I have educated myself so much through books and lectures from other teachers and what have you, I know when something is wrong, and I've gotten it to admit it said something wrong. And then it's all about how you ask the question. So this is what the answer came to me. Yes, some African-American soldiers, particularly the Buffalo Soldiers, were involved in campaigns that supported U.S. military efforts against indigenous communities during the westward expansion, including the so-called Indian Wars. The Buffalo Soldiers, a term originally, and by the way, I used to be stationed at Fort Huachuca, the home of the Buffalo Soldier, although they got another base, it seemed, in Colorado. But the Buffalo Soldiers, a term originally used for African-American regiments like the 9th and 10th Cavalry, were tasked with duties that included escorting settlers, again, being tools of white, they were deployed as tools of white supremacy to protect these white people who were being given free land, stolen land from these indigenous people who are mad about it and not accepting of this, and you're using black people to protect these white people, to help them colonize. But I'm still not going to label them as a colonizer just yet, because again, it's hard for me. But I think we're just maybe at the tipping point, maybe at a point in history. Let me check my chat, because I will be checking the chat if anyone has anything that they would like to add. Again, I'm getting new to this. And let me close the chat, then pop it back out. Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris, for liking the stream. Please like the stream. Cruising, what is that? Yeah, Cruising 5546. Thanks for liking the stream and following. I'm trying to get more active on TikTok. I like the platform. To be really, the reason I joined it is because the United States government trying to ban it. So I'm like, I got to join, because I'm a defender of First Amendment speech rights. And I'm very educated on politics and how it works and how white supremacy works as well. But I'm also very educated on the power of media, and that he who controls media also controls the minds of the masses, to borrow from Malcolm X. All right. So I understand that. And they can't have a platform that's not under their control to allow people to come on and speak freely within reason. Okay. Within reason. And they can't have that. So they trying to force the owner of TikTok to sell, trying to using xenophobia to target him. They already got Mark Zuckerberg. Look, there's an old saying in the Black Talk Radio Network community. You know what we call Facebook? Fedbook. Fedbook. Popo all on it. When I say Popo, that's a black term for police. All right. All of them are on there. They got their Facebook pages, and don't think they don't be watching y'all on there, posting your photos, engaged in narcotics activity and what have you. They're all over it. But Mark Zuckerberg, the former owners of Twitter, but I know Elon Musk, if the Trump administration asked him to suppress a story, then he would suppress a story. But we know the Biden administration got the former owners of Twitter, now known as X, to suppress that story of Hunter Biden's laptop. It's called Russian propaganda and all this and that, and threatened to punish people. So we already know Facebook and other platforms are susceptible to government pressure. And so TikTok has resisted that pressure from what I can see on the short time that I've been on here. So that's why I'm on here. And I'll continue to use it in solidarity with other users to tell the U.S. government, and include my own U.S. representative, not Mark. What's his name? It's not Josh. And I just, he became a star here on TikTok with a number of followers. His name will come to me later, but he's running for attorney general here in North Carolina. And I'm like, dude, you signed on as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for a ban on TikTok. So how can I trust you to enforce the North Carolina Constitution? And he sent me a reply when I replied to him on Twitter about what he did. Man, he sent me a cat showing me the cat's behind. You know what I'm saying? But Jeff Jackson is his name. Jeff Jackson became a star on TikTok. They was raving about how he was using TikTok to get all these followers, which they think equals support and what have you. But then he signed on for that unconstitutional ban, talking about he didn't see some secret information that it's a security threat to users here in the United States. But dude, you still on it. You just sent me that message a week ago. Kamala Harris is on here. Trump campaign is on here. So that's clear evidence that y'all lying. That your attacks on free speech against on TikTok is you're trying to control the narrative. Because like Malcolm X said, the power of the media is that they can make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent. They control the narratives. And controlling narratives is how I think that a large majority of black people have become colonizers through different mechanisms. Whether it's all been done through media, where we're talking about political talk shows, news talk shows, entertainment, like movies and stuff. Like think about Black Panther. Think about Black Panther. That was a very globally successful in terms of ticket sales. Black Panther, the movie, the superhero, with the African-American guy from South Carolina who played the hero. And so remember they had the CIA, the U.S. CIA agent in there, and the Black Panther's sister, I believe, Shuri, whatever her name was, or the character's name is, called him a colonizer. Call him a colonizer. Right? But then they working with the colonizers. So was that a way to help black people, black Americans who are very fond of that film, think it was kind of radical and they were black and proud and this is power. We've been seeing all of this white supremacist media where geared towards white people and showing them as all the powerful people. When people been beat down and seeing negative images of themselves, yeah, we want to see some good stuff where we're the heroes or whatnot. But why you working with colonizers in this film? You know, and did that ease black people, help ease it? No, I think it started way before then. And I believe I left off at the war against the indigenous, spreading the spread of white supremacy. What did they call it back then? Manifest destiny. That's what Israel's saying about Palestine and Lebanon and this whole region that these right-wing extremists in Israel like Netanyahu trying to create. So we left it off there, the expansion west. I still ain't found where they committed any atrocities. So let me go ahead and read. But they did engage in battles and skirmishes with Native American tribes. There is documented evidence that they sometimes participated in raids or campaigns that resulted in significant loss of life for indigenous people and contributed to displacement through individual soldiers' roles and perspectives vary. Many historians argue that these African American soldiers were placed in a complex and morally ambiguous situation. Again, I agree it goes down to that individual soldiers, how he was treated, what his contact with the tribes in the East, the Eastern being like the racist Cherokee, who would be forced on the Trail of Tears. It just depends on the individual. So it is complex, I would agree. So I wouldn't just outright name them colonizers. Let me see. But it is no doubt they contributed to the displacement. Now it says, many historians argue that these African-American soldiers were placed in a complex and morally ambiguous situation. They were participating in the U.S. military as a path to rights and recognition at a time when they faced extreme discrimination, even as they were also part of a force implementing policies harmful to indigenous communities. This aspect of African-American military history is often viewed within the broader context of the challenges black soldiers faced, as well as the ways they sought to navigate a hostile society by proving loyalty and valor in service. In service to what? If we're being honest about it, in service to white supremacy. Because at the same time that they were displacing these people, at the same time they were protecting these white settlers to come out here and settle on stolen land that you didn't kill people for, black people weren't even allowed. Again, we're talking about likely former victims of slavery, or maybe they were even children at the time of the Civil War, after the Civil War. But I had to say that did open the door. That opened the door. Because once you go into the military, it's an indoctrination process. I went through it. That becomes your family. But it's worth more research. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the multi-guest. I got a lot more to say, more research to share. Let me see if I can go multi-guest. If anybody wants to request to come up, let me set down this tablet for a second because I don't know what's showing or how the screen looks. But anybody can come up that wants to point to a place in time that you believe that black Americans became colonizers. I think it's logical to say that during that point of waging war on indigenous people, going towards the Pacific, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that opened up the door. But that, again, that's just a very small percentage of black people. So I can't say black people became colonizers during that period of time, because at that period of time, they fighting damn Jim Crow terrorism and what have you. These are men that are away from their families, and it's not like they could pull out a phone and see what's going on back in Atlanta or Greensboro, North Carolina, or wherever. But if you want to come up, you definitely can come up. I'm going to do better at publicizing. It's a little bit different than the way we do things on Black Talk Radio Network. We usually have a telephone number that you can call to dial in. That's not the way this particular platform, TikTok, is set up. So, but I may incorporate that later, as I do incorporate back to live streaming. Black Talk Radio Network, which you can get our internet radio station. It's always on. It's playing podcasts or music or whatever. With the TuneIn app, you can find the radio station as well as the podcast on TuneIn. Also, you can catch Black Talk Radio Network podcast. We got a couple of new shows. Let me mention this before I move on. We got a couple of new shows coming on. We got this brother out of Louisiana who's coming to us, Brother Elliot in Philadelphia. He runs our sister network, Time for Awakening Media, and that's at timefораwakening.com. He's bringing this brother on to the Black Talk Radio Network out of that area. Then we got Reverend Pinckney, who is an activist. I follow him for years. He's up in Michigan, and he's bringing his podcast. He's leaving Blog Talk Radio, and he's bringing his podcast in live radio stream to Black Talk Radio Network. So that's what's going on. Again, this is all managed by the Black Talk Media Project, which I'm the president and founder of, and you can support independent media everywhere. This includes teaching people like those people I just mentioned how to do internet radio streaming. Very inexpensive equipment is needed. It's simpler than what people would think, and you can reach people all over the world. We need to become masters of all forms of media, and but your donations do help support not just these broadcasts, and it costs us money to host a server or to lease a server to store 17 years, going on 18 years worth of podcasts, great award-winning podcasts like New Abolitionist Radio. So please go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, hit that donate button. No matter what platform you're on, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share it with your friend. This is truly independent black media. We do not take corporate money. We do not take political or PAC money. Everything you hear through the Black Talk Radio Network is coming from the heart of the black people that's using our platforms as a voice. So, again, no requests yet. Nobody wants to admit to being a colonizer. Now, come on. I know you colonizers are out there, you black American colonizers, because you're supporting Donald Trump. I think about 10% they said might be vote for Trump. That's black men and women. I don't think it was that many. But 70-something% are said to be supporting Kamala Harris, who's actively involved in the genocide. I mean, if we want to be real, again, I like to look at things through the lens of history. Who was Hitler's number 2 guy? Who was his number 2 guy? I can't remember who that guy's name was, but because Joseph Goebbels is the one that I think had the most power, but it was another guy who had something like the title of president. I can't remember his name. But we can put Biden as a person overseeing with the whole world, all these human rights groups, the name brand ones that everybody be citing, Human Rights Watch, even Israeli run human rights groups. All of them has called it apartheid, have called this a genocide. So Joe Biden is Mr. Yahtzee man, but I don't even think he's in charge. I don't even think he's in charge. And to show you how weak that I think a leader Kamala Harris is that if Joe Biden wasn't fit to run for this election, which is already taking place, but the last day is November the 5th. We just days away from it. If he wasn't fit, if y'all knew this back when y'all decided y'all were going to not have a primary, because can't have somebody like a Bernie Sanders or Cory Bush or anyone stepping up to challenge Joe Biden, Jim Crow Joe, a proud Zionist who said he's not sorry for the Joe Biden crime bill, even though it harmed a lot of black people. I just don't understand how you got so much black support in 2020, unless it's a lack of black people having all the information and not, I know, yeah, just cause X, Y, and Z celebrity, and he went on this black platform or that black platform, and you don't know how it ties into the corporate plantation, and so you just gonna vote for them. You thinking they work for you, and they testing these messages on you, and you're not really, no. There's no excuse for anyone not to know the harm that Joe Biden caused, not to know that he gave a eulogy or he was praising the white supremacist Strom Thurmond from South Carolina. Again, I'm in North Carolina. Strom Thurmond at his birthday party, one of the original Dixiecrats that stood in the way of civil rights, who predicted that Joe Biden would be president because he knew Joe Biden could play both sides of the aisle, manipulate both sides, very manipulative. And that old white supremacist said, you're going to be president one day, and I'll be doggone. And if black people, to our shame, didn't help them do it. And I put that mainly on James Clyburn and the other Democratic black leadership, or lack of leadership, I should say. So nobody wants to come up and talk about these things. When did we become colonizers? When did we adopt the values of colonizers? When did this happen? Can you put your finger at a point in time when this happened? When did it become prevalent? Okay, the door was kind of cracked open with the war against the indigenous back in the 1800s. And for some reason, I think it's the device. But then we know segregation, we had segregated forces. And I was trying to figure out if they participated in any kind of atrocities, even though we would have to come up to World War I and World War II. You had segregated black units, but those worlds, the United States participation generally was not tied to colonizing other lands. It wasn't. It was fighting the Germans in both cases and their allies. And then let's not act like we volunteered. They drafted our ancestors. They drafted our what would that be? My great grandfather, his time, World War I. I'm not sure on the genealogy right now, but when did that happen? Okay. So we went over the Buffalo Soldiers, right? So we would have to come to the Harlem Hellfighters. That would be, all right, the Buffalo Soldiers that I just got through talking about. Just to give everybody, idea of the point in time. That was the 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments established in 1866 and the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments. I was actually attached to the 25th Infantry once it was moved to Hawaii. Its home is at Schofield Barracks. I was attached to an aviation unit within, an aviation maintenance unit within the 25th Infantry. Had the Strawberry Patch. They also got deployed to Vietnam from there. But at that point, I don't think the 25th Infantry, it might have been mixed by that point. These were some of the first all-black peacetime regiments in the Army fighting in the Indian War, Spanish-American War, and Philippine-American War. So I'm not going to do it right now, but I did think of these things because I thought about what's the Roosevelt, one of them Roosevelts, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, was known to lead like these black troops when they went to fight against the Spain in places like Puerto Rico, might have been a couple of other islands on the Caribbean, also in Cuba as well. You heard of, what is it, Teddy and the Rough Riders. But I do know that segregated African-American troops were used a lot, combat troops used a lot in that war, right? But then what I don't know, and will put a check mark to do research later, is did they then turn around and participate, or were they kept there, stationed there, to oppress the indigenous people of the Puerto Rican Islands? Some of them former victims of slavery or the descendants of indigenous people who had also mixed with runaway victims of slavery. So, yeah, because Puerto Ricans still want their independence to this day. They're a colony. They're not a state. They're occupied. I know one of Donald Trump's people called it a colony, island of trash or something like that. Said some very derogatory things. Okay. Yeah, get upset about that on the surface. I'm pretty much glad when people expose themselves. They're going to be all blatant with it like that. But the Biden administration and every administration preceding theirs have been colonizing Puerto Rico. So they're colonizers. Biden, Harris, colonizers. Barack Obama, colonizer. George Bush, colonizer. Trump, colonizer. When did black Americans become colonizers? When did we adapt the mindset of colonizers? When did we just accept that the United States of America had a right to take away these people on these various islands that we're calling territories? What gives us the right to do that? Whether we're talking about Guam, the Philippines, I want to look at that. I know the United States U.S. Army committed a lot of atrocities against the melanated people of the Philippines in colonizing that island. But again, if you don't really know, this kind of news or information wasn't being disseminated to the African-American population in general. Back then we did have more of a control of our media. We had our own media and we supported our own media because, again, it's segregation. And so we have to look back and see what stories were they telling? What stories were they telling? Or were they simply like so-called black platforms today fighting for ad dollars from colonizers? And I ain't gonna say no names. Yes, I am, Roland Martin. We'll get on these airways and complain about not getting butter biscuits from Master's table. Yeah, look, we out here supporting you as black men and 80%, and we're on here carrying your water and even selling people on genocide or just totally ignoring the genocide and want to pretend like we conscious. and you don't want to spend no ad dollars on us? All of this money that you spending on these ads is going to these white-owned corporations? How can you be a conscious black person, let alone a black conscious broadcaster, and you begging for money from colonizers, right? That you willingly carry their narratives anyway, just to show them that you can be trusted to get back in the game. Because remember, that man got kicked off of corporate media because he tried to help that colonizer, Hillary Clinton, cheat in that debate against Bernie Sanders. Y'all do recall he was on News One. That was one of the black cable channels, right? Him and they've even put her back on CNN. What's the black woman's name? Donna Brazile. It was those two got caught cheating, slipping, because they was working for their place on Hillary Clinton's plantation should she have won. Just as Omarosa and the other black Republicans were positioning themselves with Donald Trump, who did win. So let's not think that I'm one of these people who is partisan. I am totally an objective. I look at it from a journalistic point of view, but also from the point of view as a black man behind the enemy lines of the United States of America Incorporated. In short, we just call it USA Inc. So let me get back to some of these timelines. So that would bring us to World War I, right? When did we become colonizers? I think it happened in the 1800s, y'all. Especially late 1800s. I have to go and read up on the Philippine-American War, Spanish-American War. But I've read enough to know that it was about global white domination and stealing people's resources and the genocide we see taking place in Gaza, Lebanon, tremendous civilian casualties. That's been going on all throughout history. It really has. Okay, no guest requests just yet. How do I minimize this so I can see more things? Let's see. Again, we appreciate those who like the live, share the live. Thank you, Chris. Please share this live feed here on TikTok with your friends. Still waiting for anybody who would like to come up and answer the question, how did black Americans become colonizers? This isn't a partisan game. This isn't no Democrat versus Republican. No, I'm talking to black people, our primary target audience, although I know everybody listens, but it's my primary target audience. And I'm 57 years old. That means I was born in 1966. Let's go ahead and bring this person up, LaCara, and I'm getting used to using this. That means I was born in. Okay, I'm getting a little feedback. Go ahead and state your name and age for TikTok. I think I made this for adults only. So what's your age? And go ahead with your comment. Lakari?
Hello? Man, I can't hear nothing. I don't know. I might have to drop down and come back up. One sec.
Okay, I can't hear you. I was able to hear you. It might have been a lag in it or something of that nature, but I was able to hear you. But you can come back up. So, but again, my question is, when do black people, and we can even extend this to non-white people, right? Because it's people who have worked with these colonizers all over the planet, or how else do you think they got in position to control these things, right? So go ahead.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay, I hear you.
All right.
Go ahead, Lakari. I hear you. Can somebody tell me in the chat if they could hear that person? Because I certainly could hear him, but it seemed like he couldn't hear me. Again, I'm using the desktop version of TikTok Live. I'm not on my phone or anything, which my Android seems to work pretty well with it. But it's so small, it's not conducive. So, Lakari, if you couldn't hear me, if you want to post in the chat anything that you would like to get across, I certainly will read the chat. It seems I am able to view the chat. Let me see if I can refresh it, whatever. See if we see anything else pop up. Okay. All right, we've been going just over an hour. I'm going to give y'all 30 more minutes. I'll continue to talk about this history. But I think we already established it was sometime in the 1800s. But again, I have to back off when we're talking about millions and millions of black people. The white supremacist media, and I don't know how much the black media at that time was reporting on what was actually going on the ground, in the Philippines, anywhere we were deploying, in Puerto Rico, in Cuba. Okay, what was going on? What were they fighting for? All right, so then we jump to, let's say, the 92nd Infantry No, the 369th Infantry Regiment. Again, I'm talking about segregated all-black units. We know they were led by white officers. The Harlem Hellfighters, an all-black regiment that fought in World War I, notable for spending more time in combat than any other American unit. Well, that shouldn't be surprising. They were black. Of course, they spent more time. And I don't think that's nothing for black people to even take pride in. You know, that they abused our men like that. Just kept them out there on the battlefield. Than any other, save the white boys. Let's keep these black men out there. Let's move on to the 92nd Infantry Division, also known as Buffalo Soldiers. Fought in both World Wars, one of the only black combat divisions in World War II. 93rd Infantry Division, another segregated infantry division that fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Now, we know the primary opponent in World War II were the Japanese and any allies, although I don't think they had many Asian allies because they were colonizing the hell out of all the other Asian people, and they were being very brutal and inhumane. Some would say even committed genocides. So that's who these black divisions were fighting. Then we got the 555th Paratroop Infantry Battalion. So that's around about 800 men. Triple Nickels, the first all-black airborne unit established in World War II. I don't know of anything they've been on. I'll have to read that history. 761st Tank Battalion, known aka as the Black Panthers, a highly decorated tank battalion that fought under the racist white supremacist named General Patton in Europe during World War II. Heard of Patton, who hasn't? Anybody that's even watches a lot of these black and white war movies and stuff. U.S. Navy, something called the Golden 13, first group of black men to become commissioned officers. That was in 1944. So that would have been during around the start of, I think, World War II. Only 13 people. Messing branch from the early 1900s to World War II, black sailors were often relegated to roles in the mess hall, though some units like the USS Mason, a ship with a largely black crew, served in the Atlantic during World War II. They probably patrolled the coast looking for things like Nazi submarines and what have you. Marine Corps, very small branch, one of the smallest in the branches of the U.S. military. I just don't want to be naming names. But this all tied mostly to World War II. And segregation of these all-black units were disbanded or integrated following World War II, particularly after President Truman's 1948 Executive Order 9981, which mandated the desegregation of the armed forces. So the next war to come after that, the major war to come after that, was the Korean War. Because of white supremacy, again, Manifest Destiny wanted to exploit the Asian people after defeating the so-called Japanese. The white supremacists just moved in. Oh, I meant to say the United States just moved in, and now we're going to be the new overlords and run these plantations and what have you, and everything's going to be done to our economic benefit to the detriment of these people who will soon become impoverished. So that would be the next war drafted. Everybody was forced into that. I haven't actually looked up the statistics on how many volunteers they got from African Americans, but I doubt it was that many during the 50s because we're at home fighting either in the civil rights movement or in the, I would just call it the armed black struggle, particularly here in the South. Korean War veteran Fred, what's his name? Robert F. Williams is from Monroe, North Carolina, which is probably about 35 miles from where I am, particularly my family. Which has been here in this particular area of North Carolina since the days of enslavement. Always strong on owning guns and self-protection. One of the reasons we've been able to maintain the land and my ancestors have been able to maintain the land and pass it on to their descendants. I think we're like in 6th or 7th generation right now. But anyway, very strong, armed black struggle that really they don't like to talk about. I mean, there's been books written about it. So I think anything after World War II, if we're being colonizers, we were drafted up until the all-volunteer force. So I volunteered in 1987 because I didn't want to take out loans or go into debt. Being an 11th grade high school dropout, just was working like 2 jobs, living with a girlfriend. Joined the military because I always had visions of joining the military. Don't know why, particularly like those type of movies. So opportunity arose, I joined, ended up finishing school in the military. wanted to go to college, and they provided the GI Bill, right? It was always my intention to finish and get my diploma, but my high school diploma. So I joined. I saw that as a way to go to college without. And then the Gulf War happened. And I determined, well, let me get to how the first time I knew I was a colonizer or got that perspective. Did 6 months, no, it wasn't 6 months. I can't remember. Might have been 8 weeks basic training, 2 months basic training down at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. AIT down there at Fort Gordon, Georgia, in Georgia. First duty station is Hawaii, Oahu, the Big Island, Schofield Barracks. That's 1987. Got kidnapped. And the way the kidnapping went down was I was in my 20s, might have just turned 21, drinking at a bar, hooked up with a local female, hung out with her, drank a lot of alcohol, kind of passed out, woke up in the morning with her and her cousin. She's driving. They drive to a beach. I get out the beach, and it's like 20 or 30 of these Polynesian brothers. It was mainly brothers. I ain't see too many other sisters, not that I was looking for any of them. And it was like they was having a meeting, a town hall of some kind. And then, I was just listening, of course, and I was told I was a colonizer, that my presence on the island, wearing that uniform, was me participating in the colonization of their island. And then, of course, later on, they let me go. I still would call it a kidnapping, even though they kept me a couple of hours. It was clear that it was I could not leave if I wanted to leave, and it was best that I just go with the flow. So I got back and I started thinking about these things. And then, of course, I'm always going to the local clubs and stuff and talking to local people, and got educated on how their queen was kidnapped by Marines. How some wealthy white supremacists, I think it was the Dole family, one of them became a senator. One of them was actually my senator, Elizabeth Dole, at one point. But how they went over there and kidnapped that queen, forced her to sign some papers. She thinking the rest of the world, which they have treaties with, is going to step up. So that nobody else loses their life. And no, nobody else ever stepped up for the Kingdom of Hawaii. And I go into more history on that. But that was my first realization that, damn, I might have joined something and not really known what I was getting into. Then once the Gulf War started, I'm into Malcolm X's biography. Thank you, Chuck D. Flavor Flav, Public Enemy, for introducing me to radical black thought and questioning my existence in this world. And started questioning what the am I doing here in Saudi Arabia, this Muslim country where my religion although I don't no longer call myself a Christian or follow Jesus, I now follow the example of Yeshua, the Jewish teacher who set an example for all of humanity, but that's outlawed in there. But even though the Quran at least does recognize Yeshua as a prophet, if not, recognizing his divine status and what have you. But I'm sitting over there, and then I'm thinking about, I got access to government-controlled media. The U.S. Army or military had their own news media networks, and they have entertainment. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm watching that over there in Saudi Arabia. I'm part of a communications battalion. And, and I'm thinking about these guys in the Iraqi army out there in the desert, dug in, whatever, and reports of them being buried alive in the sand. And then, later, as I'm getting these assessment reports from the damage that the airstrikes that were being done, airstrikes meaning missiles and bombs, the number of civilian casualties, it was astronomical, man. That stuff was never made public. And I'm still affected, and I see those numbers to this day. And I've seen people in the current administration make excuses for what the United States, let's no longer keep saying it's Israel who's doing the bombing or kill those 88 people, mostly women and children today, when two media reports have come out that the United States is doing most of the picking of the targets. Providing the ammunition. No, these are not Israeli airstrikes. These are U.S. airstrikes. Let's be factual. They wouldn't be happening without the United States. The UK is also providing a pretty good percentage of the intelligence gathering and identifying, but they claim theirs is for humanitarian reasons. Well, awful funny that Israel keeps hitting these humanitarian targets that you've identified as where people are sheltering and civilians. And a member of the State Department, this current State Department, I think his name is Mike Miller or something like that, said that what the Israelis is doing now, the United States government, who knows how long that dude, how many administrations he's been a part of, a career politician, a career swamp creature. And he's saying, hey, guys, y'all all upset about that war, these war crimes, or what y'all calling war crimes. Hey, the United States government, we've been doing this for a long time, routinely. I couldn't believe the dude said it with a straight freaking face, man. But then I know that we have psychopaths, man. People who have no empathy. So when we become colonizers, can nobody come up and tell me? Nobody can come up and tell me. Let me see, because I'm still learning, if I can pull up the live also on my phone, because I appear to have better control when I'm on my phone for these lives. Let me just turn that volume down so I don't get no feedback. So nobody, you know what? While I work on that, how about this? I'll take a music break and I'll let y'all think about it. And I will check the chat and see if anybody has anything to say. But we are going to take a quick break, 5-minute break. I know nobody wants to identify themselves as a colonizer, man, and white supremacist when you really get down to it, because that is what you're supporting at this critical moment in time, whether you're expressing support for Kamala Harris or expressing support for Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Both support the human rights crime of this new 21st century, only possibly to be rivaled by what's going on in the Congo, in which, I'm not even privy to a lot of reporting coming out of there. And I try to follow a lot of sources. Like, you look on any platform that I have an account on, whether it's under Scotty Reed, or Black Talk Radio, you will see that those pages follow thousands of people, because I gather news. I want to hear opinions. I follow different news sources of different partisan persuasion, and I can sort it all out, fact from fiction, later. But yeah, so it's hard for people to logically explain why they colonizers. So I feel nobody wants to come up and rah the colonizers, but and I just want to tell you that when you go in that ballot box, it's secret. Don't nobody know who you're voting for, and you don't have to endorse genocide. You don't have to be bullied into saying that Donald Trump win, blah, 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 blah. He gonna sick the police on you. Police already sicked on you. The Democrats in all these different cities where it's a large population of black people have what? Cop City, where they training cops. Some other times it's by Israeli IDF soldiers come over here and train cops, and cops go over there and get trained on how to practice apartheid against Palestinians. See, that's not being shared on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and the nitty-gritty of what's really going on. The white supremacy that we may be supporting and that we are supporting, whether we know it or not. So I understand if nobody can present a logical argument. So let's go ahead and take a break. Then we'll come back and tie this off. Have we settled on the timeline? I'm gonna have to say it really sped up when Barack Obama it really started with George Bush and Colin Powell, who was his Secretary of State, who lied on Saddam, helped them falsify this evidence of WMDs, didn't seem to fully be on board with it, definitely expressing reservation or regret now, but he helped sell a genocide. I mean, million people, I would call that. You can choose ethnic cleansing, whatever you want, war crimes, genocide. Yeah. So maybe we had to look at the first Gulf War, because I was in that Gulf War when he was Secretary. Was he Secretary of State? No, he was not. He was chief of staff of the military, because I was in the military during George H.W. Bush, whose son would later become president and lie about Saddam having weapons of mass destruction. And it was at that time that Colin Powell was Secretary of State and helped sell those lies and got 1 million Iraqis killed. So definitely we became colonizers. But on the other side of this break, I explained how Barack Obama put us over the top, baby. Put us over the top. Condoleezza Rice, yeah, she played her role in the Bush administration. Again, Colin Powell was Secretary of State, but nobody did it like Barack. Nobody, I think, yeah, we got to give him credit where credit's due. He's been the greatest proxy racist to ever exist at this point that I know of in terms of political history. We'll be right back on the other side. You're tuned in to Black Talk Radio News. My name, of course, is Scotty Reed. I'm broadcasting from behind the enemy lines of USA Inc. It is, a Tuesday night. It's early in the week. We haven't even gotten to hump day, but it's coming up here in a couple of hours. Hope that wherever you are in the world, you are in relative safety. I don't know where the safest place on earth exists. But I know it ain't in the Congo, and I know it ain't in Palestine. And being that we have both Republicans and Democrats, a majority in Congress, who will give a standing ovation to a madman, a war criminal who's been indicted by the International Criminal Court, condemned worldwide. I'm talking about Benjamin Netanyahu. And speaking of Obama on the other side of the break, disrespected Obama on a level that I ain't never seen a U.S. president disrespected. So that was like Barack Obama being told in so many words that you may be the president of the United States, but you ain't white. And Benjamin Netanyahu is white. I know that there is this whole narrative and media campaign to convince you that Israelis are not white. They are. They come from European countries. We're talking the people over there today, the settlers. They come from Canada. They come from America. They come from Argentina. The colonized part of South America. They come from Australia. They come from the United States, of course. They come from all of these cultures or places that's white dominated, of European descent. Okay? That's what Benjamin Netanyahu knows. That's what the United States, whether we're talking Joe Biden or any president, when they talking about a special relationship, it's based on white supremacy. That's the relationship. Okay? Let's not kid ourselves. But when we have the two major parties wholly backing the genocide, even though federal laws, all of them are breaking federal law right now, who continue to push for and vote for to send armaments to Israel to continue out their aggression in that region, the Leahy laws. So that's why then we had to go back to the Bush administration, just straight up the Bush-Cheney administration. It's where criminality is being done right before our eyes. It's being reported on the news, even though they try to report it in a nuanced way to get you to accept things like, oh, CIA tortures people, waterboards people, people have died in their custody. Oh, well, he shouldn't have been born where he was born, with the skin color that and speaking the language that he speaks. And if you're one of these people that say, hey, I'm safe behind the enemy lines of USA Inc., let's not forget that they have sent U.S. citizens to Guantanamo Bay. One man story I remember reporting on years ago on Black Talk Radio News. I think it was Jose Padilla. They had the photographs of him in the orange jumpsuit, like they going to put him on the plane, and then had the blacked out goggles, for sensory deprivation. And yeah, just solely eased us into straight up fascism. And although the United States always been fascist, what do you think Jim Crow was, if not an element of fascism? What do you think racism is, but an element of fascism? Being fascist. And I think for a lot of black people, depending upon when they was born, especially if they like my children's age, not my children specifically, because they got all the information. I've been doing this for 17 years, much of when I think my oldest child was in high school, when I started podcasting, and they listen to my podcast or hear me doing the live stream. So I'm not talking about my children, but I'm talking about children their age who are adults now, who didn't grow up with this international perspective or news from all over the world. So we have to be patient with them and not call them names and realize a psychological operation has been run against them. And that's why it's important to support independent media platforms that don't have ties to governments, that don't have ties to corporations, and when I say ties to government, I'm talking about you 501c3s out there, and you taking PAC money, or the government issues grants. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, in 2000, I think it was 2010, I did, the Black Talk Media Project accepted a $5,000 grant from another nonprofit that had gotten a larger grant to publicize the census, the 2010 census. So that's simply getting people, making them aware that the census is coming out. Please fill it out, and stick it back in the mail. So other than that, I've never taken any money from any government source or corporate source, relying totally on you, the viewers, the listeners, those out there who consume the media, which has always been free media. We've never charged, although we have done things like fundraisers with t-shirts, and we'll do more of those things. But yeah, please support us, whether it's $5 or $25 a month. And let me just give a quick shout out to Miss Terry, who just started following us on TikTok, but been a long time follower of Black Talk Radio News, follows us on Facebook, Black Talk Radio Network on Facebook, follows my page, Scotty T. Reed, and she's a monthly donor. And Miss Terry, just want to give you a shout out because you've been donating for a few years now, and that shows me that the media work that we do through the Black Talk Media Project is important to you, and it wouldn't be happening without people like you. A couple of other people gave us some followings. Asian Paradise, thanks for the follow. Cruising 5546, I think I shouted out in the earlier chat, followed us. So yeah, follow us, give us a like, subscribe, throw a few coins our way, or a few stars, as they say on Facebook, or you can go directly to blacktalkradionetwork.com. But I really think Barack Obama, his administration, along with Michelle Obama, normalized war criminals like George W. Bush, who she was hugged up with on a stage at a dedication or some kind of ceremony for the dedication of that African-American museum in Washington, D.C. This man is responsible for grave war crimes. He can't even travel in the Middle East without a shoe being thrown at his way. Okay? Great, a war criminal. Now we got Kamala Harris running around with Dick Cheney and his daughter. Then we got people scared because of all of this media campaign talking about Project 2025, when many of the people associated with that have endorsed Kamala Harris. See, they purposely confuse working class people, be you Republican or Democrat. The media is meant to keep you from uniting along the lines of race. Again, there's nothing wrong with celebrating your culture. It's nothing wrong with doing things to help a particular segment, which just happens to be your community. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we're talking about this nation where we're meant to coexist, where we're forced to coexist, actually, and we got billionaires on both sides playing both sides of the aisle against us to keep us down, and we're funding oppression all over the world, and we're conditioned to take that as some point of pride that, oh, our military, our troops are the biggest and baddest on the planet. We can send them over there and they can unalive so many people. And we're not even looking at it that the number one casualty is women and children. That we ain't out there really doing no hand-to-hand. It might be a few skirmishes, but no, they use their air power and artillery. It just beat these people into submission. It's disgusting. It's just really disgusting. And I think the Obamas played a key role in getting, and then Obama again made Jim Crow Joe, a bona fide neo-Confederate, racist Democrat, to be his vice president. Now he's Uncle Joe, he's Uncle. What did y'all start calling that man? I can't remember. Like he's one of the family, to the point he going on black platforms talking about, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. I'm disgusted. Aren't you disgusted at how they treat the masses of our people like we're so unintelligent and ignorant that that's all they got to do? And that's all they've been doing. So my advice to people, I've already voted. If you haven't voted, I'm a nonpartisan guy, but I voted for Jill Stein, and I do plan to go forward and support the Green Party to help them get 5% of the vote, of the popular vote, so that they can now going forward always be on the ballot. Then we'll work the fight to push these corporate media networks or host them ourselves, since they want to use podcasts, particularly Kamala Harris want to go on all these podcasts, and Trump just did Joe Rogan. See if we can get them to come on, let's say Democracy Now!, Breaking Points is a good outlet. Hell, if we can up our budget, hell, Black Talk Radio Network can host it. Then we can have a libertarian candidate. They got permanent ballot access, and I was happy to help them in 2012 with casting a vote for Gary Johnson on their anti-drug war platform. I was a single issue voter on that, plus strategically knowing what I'm doing, trying to help them, because we need a multi-party system, not a two-party system, which is really one. Okay? So that's the number one reason why you should vote for Jill Stein. If you're one of these people that genocide don't matter to you, but that happened to be my red line, and we'll see how many other people's red line. But when did we as black people, whether we supporting Trump or Harris, become colonizers? When did the values of the colonizers, when did we make them our own? When did we want to be the face of global domination? Joe Biden held and made us the face of the United Nations, voting against and vetoing resolutions on the Security Council to make the Israelis stop. But again, it's not the Israelis so much as it's the Biden administration and Congress, our government as a whole. That's who behind the genocide. And it's time that we attribute it to who it should be attributed to. Netanyahu and Israel's just an attack dog of white supremacy out there in the Middle East to dominate non-white people and their resources. So it's a sad freaking day in Black America that so many of us have become colonizers. We've lost our credibility. This the end of Black Lives Matter. How, what, you gonna go out there and say Black Lives Matter? You gonna say that now? You gonna go out there and say, hey, somebody empathize with us black people who are the number one targets. We're not the only ones, but we're the number one targets of this modern day system of slavery they set up through the courts and funnel us into the prisons. We're the number one. Have empathy on us. Somebody do something. United Nations, we've sent people to the United Nations to talk about our mistreatment. And I know the people, I have interviewed some of the people and know some of the people personally who went to the Geneva and made presentations on racism, white supremacy, and reparations and things of those natures at these UN bodies. Okay? And they are definitely not the type of people who be down with a genocide and supporting anybody who supports that. And it's more than just supporting it if we're talking about Harris. She's an active participant in one, a war criminal, in violation of even federal law. So how y'all gonna play the prosecutor versus the 32 count felon? You know, that argument don't work when we're talking about war crimes and seriousness of what we're witnessing in front of our face. And it's just a shame. I'm so glad that some of our ancestors, maybe they in the ether somewhere, looking down on us in shame, saying, how did we come to this? How did we come to this? We are them. We are them. We want to put out rap songs and talk about they not like us? No, we like them. We become willing partners in white supremacy. So yes, black people can practice racism as the proxies of white supremacists. I hope going forward there's no more confusion about that. To all of you flag waving, red, white, and blue t-shirt wearing black people out there. Yeah. How did we come to this? I'm looking at you. We got to get back to our moral standing as black people. And I do want to give a shout out, and we'll see how they vote, to the 300,000 on record parishioners. I don't know if we should call them parishioners, congregants, but members of black churches whose pastors signed a letter back in January saying they can't push the candidacy of Joe Biden or talk about him in any kind of endorsing, endearing terms when he's engaged in a genocide, because it's a moral issue. Yeshua would not approve. He would not approve of black Christians, of Palestinian Christians, Arabs, Muslims, atheists, whatever their classification, people, human beings. He would not approve of them being slaughtered like that. And at one time, the black church used to be the moral backbone of this country. Us struggling out there for our civil rights, which turned into civil rights for all. 1964 Civil Rights Bill didn't pertain to just the mistreatment of black people, but against all people. Whether they be male, female, whether they was born abroad or their grandparents were immigrants. Civil rights for all. But we fought for that, and that gave us this moral authority that we didn't flush down the toilet on Barack Obama, the Obamas, and now further, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Just flush that moral standing in the world down the toilet. Not all of us, but a great many of us. And why? I just don't understand why. It's not like reparations is on the table. They're not finna pass a $1 trillion bill to pay what they owe to the descendants of victims of slavery and the victims of Jim Crow. My mom's still alive. For those who want to say it's in the past, it's all history. The mechanism still exists today. None of that's on the table. In fact, Kamala's trying to run to the right of Donald Trump or match him on these issues like police brutality, violence, incarceration, foreign wars. She's just not using the racist language that he's using. Okay? But she's still practicing white supremacy. Her policy is all about white supremacy. With a few butter biscuits promised to non-white people to vote for them. And what are those butter biscuits? I don't know. Because reparations is the only biscuit, or cake you can put on the table. But again, if it's that, reparations or genocide, I'll take stopping the genocide. I can always fight for reparations later. People are losing their lives today. I forget how many people are losing their lives per minute. How many children per minute The Biden-Harris administration is unaliving in Palestine, now Lebanon, Yemen. So nobody could come up. We had a person try to come up, but they said that they had issues coming up. Although I could hear them, but we'll get the technical issues worked out. So I guess it's time to end this live. We've been going on almost 2 hours. Again, my name is Scotty Reed. This has been Black Talk Radio News, current events and political news show. We look at things, or I look at things from a geopolitical perspective and under through the lens of white supremacy and how it all ties together, how it all works. All right. So go check out some of our other podcasts on blacktalkradionetwork.com. And please, if you think our work is worthy of it, throw a few coins in the old hat. With that said, peace and blessings to all.